p.m. It seems like the mic is working. It's like hot mic this evening.
Everything seems to be
Hot mic.
functioning well.
Okay.
But we do seem to be down one microphone.
Can you hear me?
I can.
Can you hear me?
Yeah. Oh, wow. Okay.
Was-
Randy, would you like to do
Roll call?
roll call, like be official about this meeting?
I sure would. Commissioner Rothi,
Here.
Commissioner Muick, Commissioner Brenna,
Here.
Commissioner Weiss,
Here.
Chair Blees,
Here.
and also present is Brandy Howe, myself, Community Development Director.
With that, thank you, Brandy. We have an agenda in front of us. I don't think there are any surprises on the agenda. Any comment, discussion of any sort? With that, I'd take a motion to adopt the agenda.
I'll make a motion.
Motion from Commissioner Rothi,
I'll second.
second from Commissioner Weiss. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
With that, we have meeting minutes from July the 6th. Are there any comments on the meeting minutes from July 6th?
No comments from me.
I thought I had something and I cannot find, it was something really minor, like some little minor typo or something. I can't even find what it was. I had read through it, but it wasn't terribly important either. I remember. Just a quirky typo or something. Then again, maybe I'm imagining things. With that, can we have a motion to approve the meeting minutes from July 6th?
I'll make that motion.
Motion from Commissioner Brenna.
No, second.
Second from Commissioner Muick. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Meeting minutes approved. With that, the meeting is open to the public. If there's anyone here who would like to speak on items other than what is on the agenda, now is the time. I'm assuming there's no one on Zoom. Okay, that being the case, we will close the open meeting. There are no public hearings. Look at that, we're on item 6 of the
We're
agenda.
cooking.
There are no public hearings, so we will not hold a public hearing tonight. With that, we are up to item 7, which is commission business. Item A is zoning code update. With that, staff, please provide a report.
Sure. Thank you. The item on the agenda tonight, the primary item, is the zoning code update, which I mentioned that we would begin last month. So looking for a little guidance on how you would like to proceed. So tonight is kind of like a first draft at how we're going to go through this ordinance as a whole. But in general, I'm sort of starting with, I downloaded the entire code in Word from American Legal, and then started with track changes as well as I could, reorganizing, moving things around, rewording, reviewing statutes to try to make sure that we're in compliance in that regard, making changes in regard to current practices that may be different than how we actually have it codified now. And so this first round is focusing on Article 1 and 3. I skipped the definitions, which is proposed to be Article 2 intentionally, because I think that once we have more of the ordinance drafted, that'll give us guidance on what we need to actually define. Currently, the definitions chapter is extensive, and I think that maybe we don't need quite as much as we have in there now. So it'll sort of start to be built as we go through this exercise, this multi-month exercise. I would expect that it's going to take us probably 9, 12 or more months to get through the entire ordinance. This initial first go is going to be probably the least policy-oriented of all of the days that we're going to do zoning review. But what you have before you is a staff report that kind of outlines the proposed amendments. Overall changes being organizationally is one of the bigger ones. So I'm proposing that we have articles, whereas before we had none, and I'll kind of give you an example of why. So when you are the user, the code is on the screen here, and you can see that there's different sections. If I wanted to find something specific to a general requirement, which is in section 15410, it's very difficult to locate things easily in here. So for a member of the general public, if I wanted to know what is the accessory structure standards, it would take a very long time to scroll through here and read all of the different standards until you finally come up to the one that actually is what you're looking for. So having articles in there, I think, is just going to make it easier from a table of contents point of view. And then from there, I think I'll just go through the staff memo and we can just go side by side between the two ordinances. I made the mistake of not labeling draft on the one that is the draft, but that was the first one in the packet.
But the draft version has the Article 1 introduction at the top of it.
Correct. Yep.
So it's a larger print,
Yep.
which helps.
Yep. And then the second version that was included is the existing code as it's been downloaded from the website.
But you did not, do you have a version of your own that's tracked changes?
Well, I did, and then it got so out of control that I kind of gave up on the track changes.
So the track changes are in the electronic version? Is that what you're pointing to, Jim?
I provided Jim with an electronic track changes version, but I think that after reviewing it a little bit more, I didn't send it to everybody kind of purposefully because.
Wasn't critical.
Well, it's not, it depends on if you think it's critical or not. If it is something that you would like, I think what I tried to do is capture the essence of the changes. If it's critical from your perspective that you know exactly how things are changing from before to now, I can certainly do that in the next draft. But I think similar to how we did the sign ordinance update, we kind of kept it clean,
Yeah.
and it was easier to follow.
I didn't mean to muddy the waters. I was just kind of curious.
But if you think it's important, I don't have any problem doing that.
No,
But when you
I
do,
would say right now, it's not important, but let's.
okay,
go.
because with the track changes, moving something from one place to another, it's hard to capture that.
Yeah.
And it happens probably pretty frequently. Plus, if you're
Yeah.
bringing in new text, so I could use comments in the margins, that indicate I brought this in from this model ordinance for this reason. But I did try to capture that rationale in the memo. So starting from the beginning of the memo, or rather the bottom of the first page, I went ahead and created a title for this document. So we didn't have one before. It's pretty standard procedures to have a title of your zoning ordinance. Similarly, I added section 154.002, which is the authority. So it's just the citation of the state statute that gives us the authority to have a zoning ordinance. Section 3, purpose and intent, is primarily derived from the existing ordinance, but it's been modified to focus on the areas that are specific to what zoning can actually accomplish. So it's shrunk a little bit. Section 4 has been added. Again, this is one of those things that I think was just kind of moved around to make it clear that the ordinance does need to be consistent with the comprehensive plan. And so this is just a new section that took some language that was already there and put it in a more logical place. Section 5, the interpretation section, has been modified in a couple of ways. So I need to look at, maybe it would be helpful if I had it open on the screen here. Oh, okay. So on the screen is the existing code, and so I moved the section D, the zoning coordination, to a different section in the code. So I retained that, but it's not in this part of the code anymore. I eliminated section E, the zoning and the comprehensive plan. We just talked about that, so that is now section 4 in the new code. So yeah, I would say that all of this section is really just organizational changes, except for the two that I have item as policy considerations. So in section 5C of the new ordinance, this is something that was retained from the current. The statement is that distances measured shall be measured to the nearest tenth of a foot. So this is pretty specific, and some communities do have measurements that are that precise. Just something to consider if we want to be a little bit more flexible. I don't even know if we need to even state this in the ordinance. By having it there, it limits our interpretive flexibility, I think. But
Is that for items like setbacks or
Yep.
that sort of thing?
yeah, anything that would be related to measuring height or, yeah, setbacks, deck, slat, width, distances between, that kind of thing. So just something to consider. I'll leave it as is unless we decide otherwise. This other policy consideration is a statement that if a use is not stated as allowed in the ordinance, it's prohibited. I think we need to think about that.
What section is that in, Brandy?
It is in the new code, it's 154C4. So if you think about the land use table that we'll eventually get to, there's going to be a multitude of uses that don't exist because we've never thought of them before. Like a vape shop, those didn't exist before. So if we have this kind of limiting factor in our ordinance, we're going to tie our hands together in terms of how do we address things that we've never thought of before. So I think that's a policy consideration that I don't really have a specific recommended direction for yet, but I think that's something that we should consider moving away from.
That's something that has to be decided tonight.
Nope.
Good.
Just thought I'd point it out, and I think it'll be one of those things that we'll come back to when we start the discussion about not residential, but our zoning districts and what uses are appropriate. So we'll use the existing districts and the existing uses as a baseline and probably not deviate too heavily from what we have now, but we'll want to make sure that they are in alignment with how we want to move and grow forward, and also make sure that they're still in alignment with what our comprehensive plan indicates. But giving staff flexibility is probably going to be beneficial where possible, but having firm guidance when we need it is also going to be important too. So it'll be a fine line that we're going to have to draw. Like I said, Article 2 is going to stay blank for a little while until I feel like it's ready to be drafted. And then Article 3 is the administration and enforcement section. So there's been a couple changes in here. The zoning administrator, that section is pretty much the same. Something that I didn't realize is that the zoning administrator serves as an ex officio non-voting member of the planning commission. So I'm actually a member of this body. As opposed to just
That's good news. Welcome to the party.
supposed to just your staff liaison. Let's see here. There was a section on design review, And so that has been eliminated because we do not have a design review committee anymore, and that any design review would come through this body as part of any application. So that just seemed like a logical elimination there. Okay, I guess I did change the zoning administrator. Looks like I clarified that it is the enforcing officer of the ordinance, and that person is appointed by the city manager rather than the city council. So that's just a procedural thing that needed to be cleaned up.
Does that need to change, or is that staying the same?
It has been modified so that it reflects what's actually happening in the new version. So section 154B, 04B on advisory bodies has been removed. Let's see, what is that? That section is related to, it just states that the Planning Commission, Design and Historical Review Commission, the Parks and Rec Commission, and Board of Appeals are empowered per Chapter 32. That's just a statement that doesn't need to be in here. It's already stated in Chapter 32. And they are advisory bodies to review and produce or provide recommendations. So it was just, it's a redundancy, so it was removed. And also, some of those bodies don't exist anymore, such as the Design and Historical Review Commission and the Board of Adjustments and Appeals that function as provided by the City Council. I created a new section, 15410, for fees. So this is a section, some of this stuff was in the ordinance already, and some of it was clarified or expanded upon. So it's really a function of making sure that when some applicant provides to the city, they want to do a fence permit, they want to do a PUD or whatever it might be, we should have an established guidance for staff, for the general public on what is our fee structure, how are we going to administer that and collect the dollars. And it also gives us the ability to require a performance bond in the situation that they may be doing work outside of that might impact public property. So it's providing more flexibility for the city. And as well as the 15411 recovery of city costs and expenses. So a lot of the applications that come into the city require review by the city engineer, the city attorney. Sometimes we have Baker Tilly do review that, for the Lilly project, for example, that is TIF related. So there's a lot of money that comes in and out of the city that is related to zoning. And so this is just codifying how we will manage the flow of the funds to make sure that we come out not in the hole and that we're getting those costs covered.
I have a quick question about C on the fees, where you're saying that they shall be established by separate resolution by the city council. I'm just wondering whether we need the word separate there, because that could lead someone to think that the city council has to do an individual resolution for every single fee, whereas, we might want to have like a blanket adjustment done with just a single resolution. It just seems like that could bog up the works slightly.
Sure, I agree with that statement. I think it was meant that it's separate from this ordinance, but I think removing that word clarifies it further. Any other comments so far? Okay, moving along. So section 12, requirements for zoning applications. These are standard. So it basically just describes the 60-day rule that is required by statute, as well as the notification requirements. If a public hearing is required, then we have to send notices to to property owners within 350 feet of the subject site. Just discusses the application process if you wanted to resubmit, or if there is a oh, here we go. So E in this section, I don't know if I had this as so E in this section states that submittal requirements for all zoning applications are listed in Table 2. There is a Table 2 in our ordinance now that kind of, here, I'll show it to you. Kind of outlines everything that all of our application types and what we would, can you see that? So for example, a text amendment requires an application, and then you kind of scroll down to see if there's an X, then you have to provide, you know, all the things that are in the box. So a zoning map amendment will go here. It says we need to have 2 hard copies, large format hard copy. So very detailed information in terms of the submittal requirements based on the kind of application. I would like to remove this table and just simply have a statement that says submittal requirements for zoning applications are per the applicable current guidebook, something to that effect, because how we, as staff, we may have different, we may get smarter annually, I would say. And so it's nice to just have a living document as opposed to having it codified. So if I realize one year, oh, well, we need to have additional information for a sidewalk that we hadn't thought about before, or like there's a new kind of fence materials that we hadn't thought about before. It would just be nice to have a living document that we can just say, this is what you need to provide to the city for your fence permit, and then we can adjust it as necessary, as opposed to having it codified.
Edit that on an annual basis.
Or whenever we decide that we have a need for more.
Date it,
Yep,
post it, so it's available to whoever
yep.
needs the information.
So if that's something we can get away with according to legal, I'm going to advocate for that.
Good concept.
Is that then not a part of the ordinance then? That is a separate?
Yeah, it would be a separate guidance document. So it would be helpful too for an applicant, say, I want to do a PUD, for example. PUDs can be pretty different depending on the project. So we could just pull from this application document as opposed to just sending them the ordinance section. I don't know. I think it's going to ultimately be more user-friendly if we have a guidebook that kind of establishes, here's everything you need to know and expect for a conditional use process or a variance or a PUD or just your simple fence permit. And as we become smarter and learn more, then it can change as those things happen.
It brings up another item that I have to deal with regularly at my job, and that's the large format documents.
Yeah,
And I'm just wondering,
we don't collect those anymore.
okay, because the other thing is, there are some communities out there that still insist on that, and when they try to send that to us for review, it exceeds the file size that our servers can get. And so I just want to encourage us to provide an electronic version in a version that is small enough to be able to share.
Yep, I agree with that. And it's also costly too if you have to provide like 20 copies of a large format map or the engineering plans. That's a lot of paper and it's big. Okay.
There is one other item slightly earlier about the notification of 350 feet. I'm probably nitpicking too much on this, but I'm just wondering, should we say a minimum of 350 feet? I'm just thinking that there might be circumstances where we would need to let a larger area know of perhaps a slightly noxious use or something like that, where the air in the area could exceed 350 feet or something, I'm just trying to think of situations where 350 feet might not be enough.
Sure. 350 feet is the statutory requirement, but we could certainly add that language if we felt that we wanted to exceed.
And
minimum
I don't know that
requirements.
it's necessary, I just kind of wanted to bring it up for thought.
How would you create criteria for that decision, though? Because
Yeah.
suddenly you might require this property owner to do this thing and that property owner to do something different, which we really don't want to do. I mean,
There is that.
yeah, could there be a circumstance where you kind of wish you could? Yeah. In that case, I think you put forth, shall we say additional neighborhood outreach as a requirement or a recommendation, or, you start to put forth additional information to the broader community if we think that's necessary, rather than create a statute that says, we get to decide if you want to do something different.
Okay, I certainly agree
That
with
would be kind of my.
Yeah,
feel.
I just kind of wanted to give us an escape window somewhere.
Yep.
I think that I agree with both of those points. If we were ever going to be called out legally, I don't think that we would ever get our hands slapped for going above and beyond what the minimum requirement is. So I think that we'll be safe if we keep it as it's written, which is from the state law. And then also I do appreciate the idea of neighborhood outreach. So somewhere in here, if there is, and maybe this is the chapter that it would go into, if we do have certain requirements for, actually the PUD is not in here. That comes at a later time, but it could be moved and pulled into this chapter.
That's likely to be the most
Yeah, I think that would be,
controversial.
yeah, a neighborhood meeting would be probably, so let's put a pin in that and try to
Thank you.
put that recommendation in there. Okay. Moving along. So then the next sections are basically just kind of clarifying, cleaning up and being consistent where possible with the different types of applications that we have. And then in doing this rewrite, I also looked at the guidance documents from the League of Minnesota Cities and the state statute to make sure that we're checking the boxes statutorily in terms of are we meeting the requirements for conditional use permits and variances, et cetera. So as consistent as we could be, that's how I tried to make this section. But there were necessary changes just based on state law. So not a lot of discussion on that point. One thing I do want to talk about, though, is site plan review. So this is one of those policy,
Which section is that in?
that is section 154.15 in the new ordinance. And this is a first draft, so a lot of this stuff might be reworked as I continue to go through the rest of the ordinance. But currently, our site plans are submitted, their applications, like Dunkin' Donuts came through, if you recall, a few months ago. It's required to come to this body, even if it meets all zoning to a T, it still has to come here. And that is an extra step, an administrative step, a financial burden potentially, because we have to get additional, meeting notices out there. It's longer time of review for the applicants. So I would propose that this site plan review be an administrative review, so staff-led, as opposed to planning commission and council. In the instances where there would be any deviation from the ordinance, then it would no longer qualify for that simple site plan review. And it would have to come forward for whatever it might need, like a conditional use or a PUD or a variance.
So the simple review is when everything is compliant?
Correct. Yep, if we get a new somebody wants to build on a target outlot, we'll just put,
They'll have engineering review and things like that.
yep, it would all be
Part of the
staff-led.
component.
So all ordinance
Is there
review would,
any- Are there any legalities or state statutes that would prevent that?
not to my knowledge. I've had a conversation with Soren about this a few months ago and kind of expressed my preference, and he seemed to be in
I suppose
favor
it
of
depends
that.
on the complexity of it, perhaps. I'm curious if there, I'm trying to think, are there reasons that you wouldn't want to do that that can be made clear?
Wouldn't want to do,
That you wouldn't want to do the simplified staff review process instead of planning commission? I'm trying to visualize, in what circumstance would that not work?
Well, if it meets all the criteria, it doesn't seem like it would require us to consider that.
yeah.
Whereas if it doesn't, then we should.
Well, and we're relying on staff to prepare the report, have done the,
Well, there would be no report.
yeah, right, but you're doing the review anyway.
Correct, yep.
So, I guess nothing, no versions of proposals come to mind where that would be objectionable.
How many instances in the last, say, year, 2 years have come through that could have followed that path versus going to the planning commission?
I think the only one that comes to mind is the Dunkin' Donuts, and that's about my tenure is 1 year, well, less than a year with the city, and then about a year with WSB prior to that, and we don't get many.
The only thing I remember about that project was the rework of the site was a little bit complex. Traffic patterns and stuff like that, which really is an engineering.
Yep, and Morgan did, he reviewed it from that perspective, and he didn't have any concerns with it either. It's a different way of doing business. It's something that we did in the community that came from before, and it was very favorably received by the development community, obviously, because you're removing hoops from them. Then you're no longer tied to two different sets of meetings that can be complicated to get into.
So then, in that scenario, the simple site plan review, if you want to call it that, that would be staff doing the review, interacting with the developer or the property owner, whatever, and then bringing that report to council rather than,
No, I'm proposing that it just be staff completely.
so council doesn't have to.
From my perspective, if it meets the ordinance, there really isn't any reason for any additional review.
Then why does council even need to see it?
Yeah, that's how I feel.
I can expect property owners that want to do something would really like that.
I'm definitely in favor of that. I would like to suggest that if we do that, maybe we add to our monthly meeting a list of
Updates.
properties that were approved without anybody knowing it. That way, we can keep track of what's going on in the city, and we're not seeing something pop up that we weren't aware of.
Yeah, I think that would be absolutely appropriate and expected.
Here, in some of the other, municipalities that I've dealt with this sort of thing with, the planning commission does usually get informed of everything. But like you said, there could be projects where they'll call it like it's on consent, meaning nobody needs to say anything about it because it meets all the requirements. Nobody is objecting to anything. But at least it still goes through the planning commission as just a,
Informational
yeah, exactly,
report
which I think,
of some sort.
yeah, like Cameron said, I think I would still like to see everything. I think it's helpful just that we know what's going on,
Well,
but
it's like the consent agenda that the council does, that kind of a thing.
yeah,
Then you get a chance to see it, know about it,
right.
do a quick, oh yeah, what's going on?
Yep.
Be informed, and that's really all. That would seem pretty simple.
And I don't know if it would work in, the timing of how things go, but I think typically the way it works in, St. Paul or Minneapolis, the commissioners are, they know about it early enough where they're given the option whether or not they want to comment on something. And then if you know, if nobody has any comments, then it's on that consent agenda, and it, just, you know, people don't even have to come to the meeting, it's just part of the report. I don't know if that would work for us, because sometimes the timing isn't enough where, you know, we could get back to you in time, so I wouldn't necessarily push for that, but definitely having some report that we can review.
Maybe it's even just making the actual application available.
Yeah.
In other words, you get an application for something, you make it available to us. No report of any sort, except that you're seeing it, you're having done your review. Staff review says, yes, the simple site plan review is, yes, we can do that, because you'll have to look at it preliminarily for that purpose. And if it's determined that the simple site plan review is reasonable, then just make the application available to us to look at. No report of any sort from staff. Does that make sense?
I'm confused on whether or not it's coming to this body for some kind of approval, though. Is that still?
No.
No, you're not
It's
proposing that.
just informational.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I see that as being more like a staff update at the end of the meeting. Like, we had this, we had a.
We had an
application come
application
through.
for this.
Yep.
It's all fully compliant. We're running it through the simple site plan review process. And if we want to see it, it'd be easy enough for you to just take the application and publish it to us.
Sure.
Well, the one thing that I wonder about on that is, you know, is that going to slow down the application process more than it needs to be? If it's already meeting staff approval, then if we have the chance to interject after staff has said everything is okay, does that slow the process down and possibly throw a monkey wrench into things if someone on the commission has an objection to something the staff has said is already going to meet approval?
Staff will just say, too bad, too late.
Well, we really probably shouldn't be inviting commentary outside of the public meeting either.
No. That's true.
Would we, I guess something to think about too is if a project meets everything in the zoning ordinance, would we even, if it came before us under the old process, would we even have a leg to stand on if we disagreed with something? Otherwise, then we'd be going against what's already laid out in our zoning ordinance.
Right, that is kind of the point that I'm making, is that it's adding administrative procedures. But it's done that way in so many
But I
communities.
think you're
But
right.
that doesn't mean it's right.
Randy, I think you're right about what you said. It could just be in the staff report at the end.
Yep,
Yeah.
At the end of the meeting, this is something that went, you know, this project or these projects went through the simple site plan review process, and they're resolved, and the developers are doing this. And that's as much as you have to give us. Maybe that's the end of it.
well, we can think about that. That's how I have it written now, I believe. So let's put a pin in that, and you guys can consider it for the next few meetings, and maybe we'll even get another application coming in before this is all done.
So do you have it written in
Section C.
154.015? Section C.
Yep, I say no public hearing required. The zoning administrator shall conduct the administrative review for all applications. And of course, it would also go through our typical review process, which would include, we'd pull in city engineer for anything that would require that, which is for any site plan, like a Dunkin' Donuts or anything that's gonna have any, site design components. We'd want Morgan to take a look at it. Probably the utilities as well, the electric specifically, and also maybe water and sewer. So it will be getting the complete review of all of our staff that would need to see it, as it would any other way.
So that's the first step. That would be the normal step, unless there's some reason not to do it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yep. Okay, so
That's the way it's written.
that's basically A through C of site plan review. Then I added D, so this is another thing to think about. This one came from, I was working for Brooklyn Park, doing their ordinance update, And their, the person I was working under at that location had worked for Minneapolis before. And so this alternative compliance was a proposal that he suggested for their ordinance. And it seemed like a good opportunity for us as well, where we could potentially approve alternatives to a site plan. And maybe this would be one of those things, like if you're seeking alternative compliance, maybe that's when we would bring in the planning commission. So if there's something that, if there's something in the site plan that can't specifically meet the ordinance, and I can't remember exactly what some of those situations might have been, it gives us a little bit of flexibility that's separate and less onerous than a PUD or a variance option. So this is just a policy consideration that we can kind of chew on for a little while. I could even do a little bit more research to figure out where, what kind of situations maybe warranted alternative compliance in some of the cities that have adopted this.
Further review.
Okay, moving along. Any other comments on those sections?
Nope.
Okay. The rest of these are pretty much as you would expect from the previous version or based on the guidance from the League of Minnesota Cities, with the exception of I added the zoning permit one and zoning verification letter. I'm on the fence still on whether I want to keep these in here or not. They're not typically codified in the ordinance, but they are kind of applications that we have available. So I was trying to make this as all-inclusive as I could in terms of what are we collecting applications for. And a zoning verification letter really isn't an application at all. What that is somebody asking the city to confirm if a piece of property what is the zoning, has it had violations in the past, that kind of a thing. So 18 and 19, I'm still on the fence about whether or not we need to have these in the ordinance, but they're there for reference in case we decide to go that route.
Can I ask a question? Can I step back just a little bit?
Yep.
The 15, oops, wait a minute, I lost track of where. 015, I think,
The site plan?
site plan review. Getting my pages mixed up. Item E, which is the top of page 6,
Yep.
the developer's agreement. At what point, how is it determined that a developer's agreement is required? What method is used to establish that? And is it subjective or objective decision? Because it says the zoning administrator may require the developer to sign an agreement with the city. Well, okay, you can just decide that whenever you want, for whatever reason.
Yeah, there would
I'm
be,
just looking for
what is the
an
trigger?
objective criteria
Yeah.
for establishing a developer's agreement is either required or not required.
Okay. I don't have an answer at this moment. We would require it for, I mean, we did have one for Lily project, for example.
I mean, it may be that if it's a new build, or if it's you're building a new building versus you're modifying an existing building, or something, I don't know, I'm just randomly grabbing something that would be an objective criteria, that's all.
Yeah.
Based on size, dollar value.
Yeah, I mean, that's,
Typically, you would want to pull in a development agreement if the project is going to go outside of the bounds of the site that may impact. If it's off-site improvements. Yeah. So that would be one of
That
the
makes
triggers.
some sense as one criterion anyway, but
Okay, I'll take a
there might be more.
gander on that and expand upon
Maybe
that.
There's one or two bullet points that, you know, if the project involves this and, or this, then a development agreement is required, that kind of a thing. Obviously, trying to keep it simple
Yep.
and not make it,
Or a TIF establishment.
yeah, I mean, that might
mean-
be one,
That could happen without a PUD
yeah.
off-site.
Yeah, I don't know what else, but I just caught my eye.
Yeah, I appreciate that. Okay. Well, that more or less concludes what I,
Got to 20,
20.
violations and penalties, but you had taken that from the old,
Oh,
right?
let me verify that. Yeah, I didn't make a note of that, so I think that's pretty much standard boilerplate language.
I wonder if I've messed up my papers thoroughly enough.
I'll bet you have, but at least there's a page number on the bottom to help you put them back in
Yeah.
order.
Just going all the way back to the very beginning, I just wanted to say that I think I like the distances measured to the nearest tenth of a foot. That makes sense to me. That's what surveys are done in, so I mean, it aligns well with all that. So I would be good keeping that the way it is.
It seems like sometimes that would be too picky, but how do you establish when it is and isn't? Sometimes it will not be too picky, so. But yeah, I mean, since surveys are done that way, I don't see any reason. I mean,
Yeah.
surveys are frequently to a greater degree of accuracy than that. They go to hundreds.
Right.
We
they're
really,
really accurate.
we don't get a lot of professional level surveys here, though, so we got to keep that in mind. Like,
Yeah,
people are drawing,
they're
mean,
just
if we
sketching a
wa-
plot plan.
yep, if we wanted to be, we're a kinder, gentler city, you know, we're trying to be
Right.
accommodating to what we, to
Right,
to
but
residents,
if
what they have the
there's-
ability.
If there's, yeah, you don't, but that's what surveyors use,
Mm-hmm.
so it's kind of feels like, well, it's a easily measurable criteria, but if you remove it entirely, then there's no rationale for any kind of accuracy. So it's establishing a tolerance that, I think if we don't establish some form of tolerance, I mean, you can't say to the nearest foot, because that's not accurate enough. So where do you draw the line? I think.
Okay, I
think
can
a
appreciate that.
foot makes sense from that perspective.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Besides, if there isn't now, there soon will be an app for that.
Yeah,
Good point.
I guess I would also add, Brand Diego is compared to the old ordinance and seeing the structure and the organization of what you're proposing, it is far more readable, and I think it's organized in a much more user-friendly fashion, and kudos to you for all the diligence that you've put in and the progress in the direction that you're moving towards.
Thank you.
I would agree.
You're welcome.
Yeah.
Well,
It's really just going to make my life easier.
But one of the things about ordinance documents in general that I see often in my business, and ours, I think, kind of currently falls in that category, it's just really hard to find the outline format. And I think the formatting of it is key to making it readable and being able to find what you want. So I think you've done really well in going that direction. You can see where the levels are, you know?
Yeah, it's a struggle in this online version to find
It
Yeah.
is.
the thing that you need to find.
Agreed.
I can say, when you sent me the original ordinance and I started going through it, there were a couple letters that went through my brain that I won't repeat, but so this is a huge improvement, and I think the direction that you're going will make it a lot easier for anybody who is, needing to go through the process or look for information.
Well, I appreciate that. Well, any final comments on the,
I would say that I think once we get this rewritten, it would also help to have links provided after the document to the different sections for the different types of activities that you might want to do. So, if you're looking up, let's say you want to build a garage or you want to build a secondary unit on your home, that after this, there'd be a link page that would take you to that so that people could look up the information in both directions. Either, this is what I need to do to build a, whatever, and this is the document that tells you what the regulations are, or these are the regulations, and this is what I need to do to build this specific item.
yeah, I think that all flows together, and once this is all nice
Yeah.
and fixed, we'll update our website and have it user-friendly as possible. So that is definitely the direction that we would like to head. Okay, so next steps, I guess expect some additional ordinance updates at the next meeting. I don't have any applications that I'm aware of yet, so we'll continue this process. The next chapter, I believe, is districts. So we'll see what we have to discuss at that meeting.
Zoning districts is Article 4.
I think that one's probably primarily going to be a lot of organization, too. The Articles 5 and 6 are going to be the ones that are going to take a lot of time.
I would, following up on what Commissioner Wise spoke, with regard to the policy considerations, I think allowing staff flexibility, the zoning administrator flexibility to determine use acceptability or something, as long as as long as it's not identified as a prohibited use, it would seem to me that that's potentially an okay thing to include. Obviously, a prohibited use or a conditional use will be defined. So at what point in time do you determine that, there's some other use that somebody came up with? How do we determine if that's acceptable or not?
Right.
Then it's a matter of interpretation of the ordinance. So it seems that's the zoning administrator's role, in my mind.
I would agree. Something that we might look at, the planned unit development procedures currently lives in, I think, the overlay district section. So I probably will pull that out and then put it in Article 3. So we'll have some adjustments to Article 3, one of the ones that we looked at today.
Because PUD kind of wants its own thing.
Well, it's
I
a,
agree. I mean, it's a unique development method.
it's a process,
Yeah.
whereas, CUP variance, those are all processes
Right.
that are outlined. How do we do
Yeah,
them?
it's a different process, so.
Yeah.
Okay. I have a question.
Sure.
I think we talked about it after the meeting last month. I was curious about replatting. If someone is taking and doing something with a piece of property that maybe is 3 pieces of property and they want to put a building on it, and it's never been combined and collected as one piece of property, are there any requirements right now that require a property owner to do anything in that regard?
I don't-
Should we?
We should, absolutely.
I think-
I don't think we do. We are as we can. So the Lilly project, for example, I think it's in the development agreement that they have to combine those lots before they pull a permit. So that is one mechanism of getting them to do the right thing, until we have a subdivision ordinance that makes sense, but right now it does not.
Okay. That's part of the process that we're talking about.
That's a different ordinance,
Yeah.
but it's coming.
It's not 154.
Correct. It's 153. I started to work on that one. But I think I'm gonna need some assistance from legal because our city is so different because it's completely built out. And a lot of the situation, we're not subdividing land really anymore. So our subdivision ordinance needs to be pretty specific and unique.
I mean, most of the properties, at least the residential properties, that have like a house on a big lot, it's actually several lots.
Right.
And sometimes the house crosses property lines, but it might be 3 lots with 1 residence on it. And
we do get a lot of inquiries about, can I split my lot?
they might split the lot in a different way or something like that. So you try to accommodate the variations and figure out how to do it in an ordinance. It's complicated.
Yep, it's on the to-do list.
Okay.
Future meeting, sounds
Yeah.
like it's gonna be down the road.
Okay. Thank you, Brandy.
You're welcome.
Very good information. Now we can study it further and bring any comments to our next meeting, I assume.
Absolutely, yep. Anything that you think of later regarding these chapters, feel free to send me an email or bring it up next time.
With that, we shall move on to item 8 on our agenda, which is reports. Do you have any further reports?
I do not for this group. Well, the Lily project is underway. I think they've pulled some permits, and I believe the demolition will be occurring shortly, like in the next days, weeks or so.
Do you happen to know what they're doing with the electrical power lines and such behind on Sepulveda?
They're going to bury them.
They are. Do you know for what distance?
I believe from the post office to maybe halfway down the next block to
Okay.
the west.
Okay.
So
I was curious.
around where like the Weber building is.
Yeah, I saw them working on the lines, and it looked like they put in some new temporaries. And they looked temporary, and I thought, oh, that's encouraging, because I think it would be very attractive if they did go underground.
Yep, I think any future redevelopment that we're going to see, we're going to most likely do the burying of the
There's
utilities.
a lot of stuff going on there utility-wise
Yeah,
along that road, so it'd really be great if we could clean it up.
it's happening.
Then we'll put in a splash pad or something someday. I don't know whose job that is. That's the Park and
Park and
Rec.
Rec Commission, yeah.
Hey.
Oh, you know what? I do have something to report. I don't know if you got an email from Chris yesterday about the parade.
Yes, I did.
Okay. Apparently, this is something that all the commissions are invited to participate in, and Carrie is the one that's been orchestrating or managing the parade. And so there is I don't know if it's a float per se, but all of the city committees are invited to attend and participate in
And be in the parade.
and be in the parade.
What's the date? Do you know?
I can tell you in a second.
Yeah, I didn't see that today.
September something?
It
September
is
something, yes. but I'm
14th at 6 PM. Lineup begins at 5:15.
Oh, thank you very much.
Just barely made it before I leave town.
Just in time. Sounds like you're going to be there. Is that what I just heard?
Get your candy.
Well, my wife is a parade liker, so we could probably find a way to show up.
Sounds good. That is the only thing I have to report.
All right.
Brandy,
Commissioner.
what's going on with trying to get any additional members for our committee? Anything going?
We're counting on you to recruit.
We don't have any additional applicants at this time.
Okay.
Commissioner Murick, do you have any report?
No, nothing.
Commissioner Weiss, do you have any report?
No, sir.
Commissioner Brennan?
Just a quick one. My family and I attended the House Park food truck event last week, and that was very nicely done and nice family-friendly event. So I thank you to the city staff for putting that on.
I will let them know.
Yeah. Good.
That's it.
Commissioner Rothi?
Nothing to report.
I I missed that, unfortunately. I had another event that I had to do in Edina that day, so, but I went last year, and it was good.
Yeah.
It's a very good event.
I went this year. It was interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I got a chance to go to History Cruisers, was it last week? I think it was last week. And very well attended. It's always a great event. It's something we should never quit doing if we have a group of people willing to organize it.
I can't wait for the downtown to be redone to where they
Yeah.
can double the number
Yeah.
of cars.
Yeah,
Yeah, I was wondering when 7th is supposed to be reopened. Do we have a tentative date for that yet?
there's paving,
It's my understanding that it's supposed to be done about the same time of the parade.
yeah.
Oh, okay, cool.
And I saw concrete paving a couple of days ago.
Oh, yeah, it's all paved right now.
That's encouraging. And I just want to make comment, call out to the, I'm sure Park and Rec had something to do with getting the park signs up. New park signs.
Absolutely,
They
yep.
look really good.
Yeah, very nice.
That would be Jill, officer, so I'll let her know.
Yeah, pass that along. That is it, as far as I'm concerned. If there's nothing else, I'd entertain a motion to adjourn.
Move we adjourn?
Second?
And all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Suppose I should do the gavel formally. Formally cutting it off.
formally gavel us in.
Yes, I should do that.
Got it done in an hour, nicely
job.
done.